There is a ton going on. And I think maybe what I'd like to start with is that the dumbest politics is shutdown politics, but we're in it again. We talked about it last week with Kevin McCarthy. At that point, there wasn't going to be a meeting with congressional leaders on the Democratic side, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. And then there was going to be one. Then Trump called it off. But now it's back on, and it's happening Monday afternoon. You know shutdown politics well. What do we need to know about today? I thought the White House had a very good card to play in which it said, if you want to do this, fine, because basically we'll just fire a whole bunch of federal workers. And I know that the Democrats don't want that.
No, they're going to make it as painful as possible. Russ Boy over at the Office of Management and Budget and the White House team have been preparing for this eventuality if this comes to pass, and they will not make it pretty for Democrats. And a lot of it will probably live past the government reopening ostensibly too.
Right.
But what I've learned, and you're right, I've been through this back over 10 years ago. If you remember when Ted Cruz shut down the government over Obamacare back in late 2013. I've been through this in 2018 when Chuck Schumer shut down the government. The first mover or the instigator in a shutdown always loses. They will try and spin you and say this time is different or this means this, and always lose. However,
can I interrupt you just real quick? Just for historical reference, when I was working on Capitol Hill in 1995, I had just started. I worked as a staff assistant for 6 weeks, and then I moved into Congressional office of Congressman Dan Schaefer, and I was going to be the press secretary. And a shutdown happened. The first shutdown happened in October of 1995. And that was my first day on the job. It was the first day of the first government shutdown. So that's one of the reasons I think it's also ridiculous because, as you're pointing out, we always know how it's going to end.
Always know it's going to end. And I remember correctly, Newt Gingrich got a lot of scrutiny for shutting down the government there. I think there was a picture of him or a cartoon of him in the Daily News as a baby. He was not fondly characterized in the press over that. But I will say this. At the same time, almost never, especially when you're shutting the government when there's not a midterm election that year, it has very little electoral potency. Like I remember back in 2013, the Ted Cruz shutdown happened. And a year later, over a year later, Democrats, Steve Israel was a former congressman from New York, was the DCCC chair, still talking about the shutdown. And President Obama's numbers were in the toilet. And we're just kind of laughing like, that's all you got. So the potency electorally is not really that much either.
Okay, so Schumer and Jeffries, they have not had a meeting with Trump since he took office in January. The last time they had one of these meetings, we just played this montage of the look back of the shutdown of 2018. President Trump just did it all in the open in the Oval Office. Now, the president has a press conference today at 1:15 with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So he'll take a lot of questions there. Do you think he'll open up this meeting? And is that to his benefit or the Democrats' benefit? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of strategy that's going on getting Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries ready for this.
I don't think it's in his benefit, personally. Look, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, for their own internal politics, want nothing more to be in the Oval Office, showing up Trump, yelling at Trump, hectoring Trump, right?
Okay.
Trump needs to be above that. He can have the press in there, but having Schumer's and Jeffrey in there with him on the same plane in the same room, I wouldn't want it.
Okay. One of the sticking points is healthcare subsidies. Let's go back. It's actually Obamacare subsidies. And it's interesting because Obama weighs in periodically, not very often, but I noticed on X yesterday, he decided he was going to weigh in on this because it's his signature bill that continues to be exactly what Republicans said at the time, which is that if you do this and you take away these market forces, it's never going to end. Now the legislation is broadly popular, and there would be consequences for many, many people if the government shuts down and these things aren't dealt with, et cetera. So we're still dealing with Obamacare politics all these years later.
And look, they knew that passing it, right? Like that's why if you pass a new entitlement, you can't get rid of it. And people, that's why we fought so hard at the time. It was so hard to get rid of. And you know, we had our issues with it in their first Trump term to getting rid of it. But look, I will say this too, you know, it used to be novel when Obama would weigh in on something, right? But now I feel like it's not. It's like every other week I see him
It doesn't
weighing it.
really have it doesn't
No.
pack a punch. Why? Why is
How
that?
I mean, because he's become another liberal talking head, right? Like, your old boss, 43, you rarely hear from him. I think the last time was Charlie Kirk when he got assassinated, and I can't tell you the time before that, right? Maybe FR, maybe, if I'm trying to remember correctly. Obama coming in and acting like he's on, Morning Joe with issues of the day, like, I don't think that's helpful for him. And also it dulls the impact of what he says.
But we're also in the middle of this mayor's race here in New York, and you had yesterday Eric Adams drop out. I watched ABC local news last night. I love local news.
Local news is great.
So the Fox local news wasn't on because of football, so I watched the ABC affiliate, and they had these reporters, and I actually really love all these women who've been in New York journalism forever. And I can't remember her name, but she said she was out and about. She said, we did not find one person who was disappointed that Eric Adams had dropped out of the race. And she said, and I looked for them, right? So he's getting out of the race. His numbers were terrible. He was hardly doing anything to win anyway. But regardless of how that turns out, there is a strong movement behind somebody like a Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist, who is talking about housing and health care and the cost of living, and you don't have that many Republicans doing the same.
No. Look, and that's going to be a sleeper issue for Republicans, I think, in the midterms. I also think if you're going to run for president in 28, you need an answer and a policy on housing and affordability.
Yeah.
I was with some Republican governors last year, and they were out west. It was Greg Gianforte, Spencer Cox, Bill Lee, and nobody's idea of a squish. And they were talking about how hard it is for folks my age. You're not super, I'm not in my 40s yet, but I'm out of college for a little while, to own a home, to buy a home. And it is a big deal. So they're going to have to talk about that. At the same time, look, the time to, really, take out Mamdani's candidacy was like 2 months ago. Like, Eric Adams waited so long. I'm also bearish on the effect this will actually have in the race at the same time,
So let's also talk then about what happened over the weekend with President Trump saying, all right, I'm going to send forces into Portland to deal with the attacks against the federal buildings there, and also in Chicago. So 2 blue cities with some troubles, but they're pushing back. And it's not as black and white as being able to send troops into Washington, D.C., because actually that is allowed. How do you think that will turn out? And what do you think it means politically for either the president or those mayors?
Again, Democrats fall into this trap where Trump proposes action, especially on law and order. And Democrats sit there and tell you what you're not feeling, what you're actually feeling, or technically, from the high, it's down, the numbers, and they try and deny it. You saw this all during the Biden years with immigration and the economy. It's the playbook, right? I also think there's a great book by Michael Schellenberger called San Francisco. And in one of the chapters, he talks very in depth about the Portland PD disassembling. Do you remember the autonomized zone or whatever?
Yeah. Chop Chaz.
Chop Chaz, exactly.
My favorite.
And the frustration on the police chief in Portland, who's no longer there, who just wanted autonomous zones in a city is egregious and ridiculous. And the political leadership wouldn't let them do anything about it, wouldn't address it. People were getting hurt, people were getting shot. It was a pox on Portland for weeks. I think Trump isn't going to let that happen again. And look, I'll say this too. You don't have a right to interfere with law enforcement, especially federal law enforcement doing their job. And I think that is the crux of the legal question that's, Trump is trying to face right now.
What about Chicago?
They could be doing so much. Chicago's a great city.
It's a great city.
It's going to be so much better.
No.
And Brandon Johnson is just so incompetent. I thought Lori Lightfoot, who I actually got to know, we both taught at the University of Chicago, and was a very nice person. She certainly was, not my cup of tea politically, but Brandon Johnson has just lowered the bar to he can't even see it.
I don't even think Lori Lightfoot likes him.
No, she doesn't.
That's right. Yeah.
But I just been clear about that. But yeah, and Johnson, I think, what's also frustrating is they had an opportunity to elect somebody who would take on crime. And even like nonsensical things, like there's a software they install on the telephone poles that tracks gunshots. They could see, hey, we're having gunshots in this area, that area. I don't understand the idea of taking that down, but
right.
And it's just like things like that make people less safe. And let's be honest, right? It's not the folks often living on Miracle Mile that stretch downtown Chicago of, the Rolexes and Louis Vuitton stores that are getting most affected by this. It's the folks on the South Side, right? That are
always.
And so it's a shame.
And the schools.
Yeah, the schools. Oh, you see the Chicago Public School Teachers Union posted a tweet over the weekend praising Asada Shakur, who is the person that died, who escaped prison after killing a New Jersey state trooper. That's what 1 in 3 Chicago kids can't read, and they're posting about a murderer who escaped justice. That's what they're doing.
Yep. Could you handicap for us your thoughts about the New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial races? These are off-year elections. They tend to get a lot of attention. Sometimes difficult for Republicans to run in those two purple states. Well, Jersey mostly a blue state. When a Republican president has just won, but I think in Virginia, it looks like that gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans hasn't been able to pull ahead against their Democratic challenger. But in New Jersey, is it closer?
A lot of buzz around Jack Ciattarelli, who's the Republican nominee in New Jersey. There's a poll over the weekend of him tied with Mikey Sherrill. There's been a lot of bad press on Mikey Sherrill recently. I would actually say if you gave Republicans truth serum, they'd probably feel better about the New Jersey governor's race than they do the Virginia governor's race right now. Could change. But the tough part about New Jersey is you can get to 47% if you're a New Jersey Republican. Getting that last 3 is really expensive and really tough. But I also say I'm also keeping my eye on Jason Miyares, who's the Attorney General nominee. I think he probably of the 3, Governor, LG, and Attorney General, the top 3 offices in Virginia, he probably has the best shot to win outright.
Let me ask you this. If you're Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican in New Jersey, and you're down by a little bit, but it's kind of out of reach in terms of that last 3, do you want President Trump to get there and put his shoulder behind it and try to get you across the finish line, or whatever that line is called, the goal line, whatever, when you make a touchdown? Or do you prefer him to keep a distance so that you can say you're independent?
Without looking at his internals, my worry about this, all the midterms, is the Republican base getting out. The Trump voters in 2024 who don't normally vote for people other than Trump coming out. I know that the left is going to be excited. We know this in a ton of special elections. So I would almost rather have Trump get out there and energize people that came out for him in 24 to do it again.
Well, all right. We'll see. We shall see. Last week, we had the Kamala Harris book tour, 107 days. I know you've got thoughts, and I'm going to turn it over to you. What did you think of her book tour? How's it going? And what is her political future?
It's so hard to screw up a book tour. I mean, she's not going on, I don't think she's done Brett Baer.
She turned us down at America's Newsroom too.
I'll tell you, she loves watching Fox. That was the dirty secret for the longest time in DC. She would be obsessed with what Fox News said. But I'm surprised she doesn't want to come on. But she'd get jammed up. It's a story of her campaign. She would get jammed up on easy interviews. The View, Rachel Maddow. I mean, look, and she is a prosecutor. She is somebody who you can prepare an opening argument or a closing argument. She can run through her lines, but you get her thinking on her feet. She is not a good communicator. She can't improvise or ad-lib very well. I mean, look, this book tour is reinforcing everything we knew about her as a politician. She's not good at this. She's just not.
Mm-hmm. So do you think she has a political future? I don't.
But now the question is, does she think she does? And,
I don't think she does. Well, maybe she thinks she does. I don't know.
I think she might. I do. I mean, you know how people are in these bubbles, but you're right. I don't think she actually has one.
Do you think that most Democrats are also tired of her?
Yes. I think she'd come out in the book tour, had some good answers, snappy, this and that. Like, she might have been pressing people, but, everyone knew that the more people saw Kamala, the less people liked her. If the election was in, September, she might have won, so I think that is a huge detriment to her. And again, the fact that she still doesn't understand why differences with her and Joe Biden were something that people would want to know about when she was on The View and it was asked about again just last week. She's learned nothing. Nothing.
Then do you think that Gavin Newsom, with his newfound, foul mouth, going after Trump in a way that is, to me, it doesn't seem authentic, but maybe this is his new thing and he's going to keep doing it. I know his numbers go up. I mean, is he now leading the Democrats?
I mean, he's good for him. He's won 2025, or I should say he's won the first half of 2025. Great. Like, I work for Jeb Bush. I love the man, but we're not voting for another 3 years or 2 years, really, right? So and he hasn't taken on any attacks from other folks in his own party. So I think it goes back to that Democrats are just obsessed with tactics. They love swearing and tweeting and starting podcasts, but you ask them how do they define a woman, and they look at you like you have six heads. When it's strategy, they need to rethink, not tactics.
It's strange. Sometimes I feel like on Sundays I do a ton of research, and yet I still feel like I must be missing something.
I don't think you're missing anything, but I will say two things I'm really watching this week are what comes out of these meetings on Monday with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, if they can get a deal done either late Monday or Tuesday or even later in the week. We'll see.
This is for a Gaza ceasefire plan and release of the hostages.
Exactly. We need to get those hostages home, and Israel, we need to keep Israel, safe and protected. But also, what we're looking at with the shutdown. I mean, I have no doubt that if this shuts down, as much as the instigator always loses, the mainstream media will run cover for Democrats in a lot of ways, and the White House needs to be ready for that.
Let me ask you something, Matt, because I haven't lived in D.C. for many, many years, since 2011, and I feel like I'm pretty up to speed on the newsletters and things that are out there. So many different ways to get news. What do you find is what's your morning routine for news consumption?
I turn over and I will read all kind of the newsletters. I'll read Punchbowl, Axios, Politico, get as much as you can. I read The Athletic because I try to be normal and read about sports.
I should probably read that.
It's great. I'll give you some recommendations. And then I just check X, honestly, and see what's broken overnight. And if you have a good, X following list, like, you can get a really good sense of what you're in the newsletters. And I think, one of the other spaces I really like reading, it's a newsletter that comes out on Sunday nights. It's by Bloomberg. It's media. And look, as we saw with the Jimmy Kimmel stuff, so much of media is politicized. Lucas Shaw does a great newsletter on media and business and politics and the intersection of all of those.
Oh, wow. Is that a prescription? Subscription?
Nope. It's free. So I can send you that. And also Puck does a really good job with all their numerous newsletters from, John Oran.
That sounds fantastic.
It's really good.
Okay, so I'm glad I asked that. One thing that I also do the Punchbowl playbook thing, but also I think Fox News Rundown, the podcast in the morning. I like that one because, especially on a Monday, I'm like, wait, what happened? And so that one's quick. I think I could probably do a little bit better on where I'm getting my news on X, because I feel like it's changed a lot. And I used to go there all the time for breaking news. And now I find like it's just sending me the same stuff over and over again, not from news sources, but from people that I don't even know who they are. Not that they don't have some good commentary. They do. Sometimes they do, but I find it's not as efficient for me as a news consumer as it used to be.
You got to curate it. And I will say this, probably I shouldn't be saying this on a news podcast. I find myself also backing away from being so immersed in the day-to-day news. I try not to be headlong into it. Watch ESPN, have a good, well-rounded nature, I feel like is helpful for everybody. But yeah.
I still get People Magazine, hard copy.
Same.
Do you want to, I'll tell you, I'll leave you with this. So years and years ago, I was asked to fill in for Fox and Friends anchor who was taking a day off. And I'd never done it before. I didn't know what I was doing. It was a Saturday. So I said, sure, of course, I wanted the opportunity, and it was fun to do, and everybody here is so great to work with. And there was a note on one of the briefing papers that said, make sure not to ask about his divorce, this guest that was coming on. And I was like, I didn't even know he was married. I don't know anything about a divorce. Why is this divorce even important? And I realized if I was going to do this kind of work, I had to get out of just thinking about news out of DC. So I get People magazine. I don't always read it cover to cover, but I always look through it just to see what in the world's going on.
Same. I get crap from my girlfriend. She's like, you read People magazine, you know more about pop culture than I do. But like, if you're sitting at dinner with somebody, you're sitting at a bar, nobody wants to hear about what Speaker Johnson just said. No offense, at the press conference. Like, they're far more interested. Okay, like, did Selena Gomez get married? Like, it's well-roundedness is, I think, a good thing we lose sometimes.
Well, on that note, we will leave it there. Matt Gorman, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
And we'll see you next week on Perino on Politics.